Yes.
How?
Depends, like if you need more amount of petrol, depending on your requirement, you can modify the configuration and you can get that.
Modify the configuration of the
Refinery.
from batch to batch?
I'm not sure from batch to batch, but yes, you can modify the configuration.
Be sure of what you are saying, my dear sir, because you cannot reconfigure a refinery on a batch to batch basis. You will go bankrupt in one configuration itself. You get about the reconfiguration every now and then.
So it depends on the kind of crude you are importing, its density and sulfur content.
So the quality of crude will determine the output that you get. But let us say that if the same crude is fed into 4 refineries, would the output be similar? Please, my dear sir, please hold your horses. Yeah. Because you see, the purpose is to improve your awareness by questioning your present level of knowledge. So therefore, please allow me this liberty. Yeah.
So it will depend on external factors like whether
External factors. There are no external factors, my dear sir. This is a scientific process. The weather cannot play a role in what you get out of refining process. Or my mood on that day cannot have a role to play in that.
or a batch it would remain same.
So let us say that Venezuela has an oil field which produces 1 million barrels a day. It is loaded into 5 different ships, and those 5 different ships go into 5 different refineries. Will those 5 refineries produce the same output
No, it depends on the configuration.
of the?
Refinery.
So therefore, the quality of crude has little role to play in what output you get. Are you with me now? Please remember, yes, there is a contribution of the quality of crude, but largely the output is determined by the configuration of the refinery. Right? And here I will take you to the next question. Okay. That is where the concept of Nelson's complexity comes in. Right? My question to you is, are you familiar with the term? Hold on. Yeah.
So the complexity with which a refinery can handle different fuels as a high or high capacity, high sulfur content or low sulfur content. It's sweeter or it's sour. So it's actually a characteristic of a refinery whether it can handle both these kind of fuels at a time,
Crude.
at the same time. Yeah, crude
Crude.
at the same time.
Anybody else would like to elaborate on this?
Different Nelson complexity will tell you how much different mix of crude, different API gravity it can handle, and that determines their gross refinery margin.
Can somebody modify that a little more? Yeah, one of the girls there, please. Would you like to modify or elaborate on this? What do you understand by Nelson's complexity? No? Would you like to try? Yeah, I'm talking to you. No? Please remember, refining of crude is a process, and every process will be determined by the kind of components that you have installed in that process. Whether you have a cracker or you don't have a cracker, what kind of fractional distillation you have, at what temperature you are cracking, all those things will determine what final product state you will get. Of course, the quality of the crude also is a contributing factor, but not the sole determinant of the output. The higher the index, the greater the ability of the refinery to handle a diverse range of crudes and produce a flexible output package. For example, let us say that I import 1 million tons of a particular crude, and in one batch I am taking only 50,000 tons. From the same crude, 1 million tons, in the first batch I could produce a different output, in the next batch I could produce a different output. That will be possible only if you have a highly complex refinery. The average refineries in US have a complexity of around 9.5. In Europe, their older refineries, their complexity is only 6.5, which means that their ability to have a adjustment in production is very, very limited. They can only produce basics. While some of the refineries in US do have higher, but I'm talking of the average. Look at these numbers, then you'll understand. Africa, 42 refineries having an average throughput of 78,000 barrels. And look at Australia, 87,000 barrels. South America, 57 refineries with only 97,000 barrels per day. Look at Europe, 144. Look at India, 185. 21 refineries with an average throughput of 125,000 barrels. With 3.6% number of refineries, we are producing 4.6% of the output. That means on average, our refinery capacity is about 40% greater than the world averages. And the biggest refinery complex in the world is Reliance Industries Jamnagar. 1.24 million barrels a day, 63 million tons per year. It's the largest refinery complex in the world and also the most complex. The complexity is 14, the highest in the scale, which means, okay, we'll come to that a little later. I mean, all the attributes, the benefit that we get out of that. Look at this, My apologies here. This should be 20,000 and this should be 10,000 and this should be 5,000. I'm sorry, the numbers are same. But there are only 9 refineries in the world which process or handle more than 500,000 barrels a day. Right? Reliance is the largest with 1.24 and the next is SK Energy's refinery in South Korea, which handles about 850,000 barrels. And the smallest refinery is at 1,200 barrels per day. Look at the range from 1.2 million to 1,200 barrels. Now, the guy who has these, let's say, refineries, which have an average daily 30,000 barrels and 20,000 and 15,000 barrels, these bottom of the pile, these 400 odd refineries, do you think they will ever have the money or the resources to make a highly complex refinery? They cannot, because their throughput is so low. If they had any greater ambition, they would first increase their capacity, then talk of increasing their complexity, because the cost of increasing complexity is far higher than increasing capacity. And here, in the bottom half, are almost 80% of the refineries of the world. The competition is here, 200,000 barrels and above. That means the top 4. The number of refineries is less than 400. The total number is only 642. It's such a small number. And imagine if a Jamnagar has an accident, or if a Jamnagar has a halt in production, what it means for oil prices. Are you with me? If a 1,500 or 2,000 or 5,000 barrels per day capacity refinery has a shutdown or a fire or some such thing, it will not impact. But if a large refinery has a problem, it will definitely have an impact on prices. Because availability will come crumbling down. Because there is, while it is true that there may not be a great mismatch between demand and supply, but definitely if 1 million barrels per day is not available, it is going to hit the sentiment more than the physical demand. And people will tend to hoard for energy security. As I said earlier, as prices firm up, demand rises, and there is no sizable growth in capacity, what is likely to happen? Increase in capacity utilization. Look at this. From 81, North America refineries have moved to 83.8 in 2011. from 76 to 78, from 83 to 84. And other places of other continents, other countries also the same thing is happening. And this is likely to happen in this year and subsequent years as well. Look at this number. 102. All the PSU refineries last year produced at 102% of their capacities. Jamnagar produced at 107.4. SR produced at over 110% of their capacity. Right? Why this was there? Because there is a shortfall in capacity globally, and there is a demand, and they are likely to get a good price. You would tend to, improve your production, to keep, shutdowns to the minimum, to have debottlenecking in your operation. All these things you will do, wouldn't you? Same thing Reliance has done, same thing PSU refineries have done. They have tried to debottleneck, remove all the obstacles, and to maximize production. This is vital, not only from Reliance's point of view, but also from national point of view. And why no new refineries are likely to come in the Western world? Because the capital cost is going to kill them. They're out of business. You will not find a million barrel refinery per day coming in the Western world, at least in your and my lifetime. It will not happen because they will be out of business. It will be unviable because of the huge capex involved. Look at the difference in capex. When Jamnagar 1 came up, the cost in OECD countries would have been close to $13,000 per barrel per day. If you're talking about a million barrels, what would be the cost? Huge cost. Huh? And in comparison, Jamnagar 1 was built at less than half the cost, at $6,000 per barrel per day. And same in 2008, when Jamnagar 2 came, OECD cost that year was estimated at $19,000 per barrel, whereas Jamnagar 2 was built at $10,000. Slightly less actually, $9,800 per barrel. Which means, and this is only in terms of the installed capacities, not taking into account the complexity. If you were to take complexity into account, the OECD cost for a similarly complex refinery of 14 would be at least 3 times higher. This is only twice. Similar complexity would push it by another $10,000 a barrel.
Sir,
Yeah.
do you think the reason that the disparity in price is because of the environmental concerns and
Both environmental, wages, and non-availability of land and manpower. You see, for example, a Jamnagar 1 was built in a period of, okay, we'll come to that a little later. I think I have something on that. You see, here. Jamnagar 1 refinery, Bechtel, the world's #1 consultant for refining, said it will take almost 8 years, I think. Yeah, 8 years. And for Jamnagar 2, they said 6 years. And Reliance set it up in much less time, 60 months and 36 months. In the Western world, you will never be able to push labor to that. In Jamnagar 1, we had 150,000 people working on the refinery site at any given time. Where will you find 150,000 workers in, let's say, a Scandinavian country? You would have to import people from Africa. Or the refinery would come in 20 years. Look at it that way. Na? Environmental concern is one thing, but compressing project time has also helped us to reduce cost. The interest cost will keep mounting, na, otherwise. Are you with me? So that is why I am saying a huge refinery and equally complex refinery, other than China, I doubt if it will ever come. Because they still have manpower, even more than India, and they also have ability to compress times and expand work days, to make people work 20 hours a day for years at a time without any legal problems. Right? This is one of the reasons why it is not likely that a Western country will be a competitor for Jamnagar. Or a huge refinery of this sophistication will come in the Western world. It will not come in Africa because there is no consumption there. Logistics will kill that. it can only happen in China because they have captive consumption. But what is bothering them, or what is going to bother them is they don't have crude in close proximity. Because China cannot set up a refinery of this complexity in the main geography of China, but it can definitely set up a similar refinery or even larger refinery in, let's say, Venezuela. They can go and set up there. You have huge consumption close by, huge oil fields close by, and you have sizable industry flowing from China. That is possible. Right? Or it can happen maybe part of the Middle East. They can come and set up a refinery. There are a lot of refinery complexes, but much smaller that are coming. Last line is important. The reason I put it in red is because it's only an approximation, but not way off the mark. I mean, if I say 4 MMT, it may be 3.8, it won't be 2. Are you with me? Jamnagar has combined crude and finished goods storage in the region of around 4 million tons. When you compare this with any other refinery complex in the world, it is unparalleled.
Sir,
Yeah.
this technology for refining all these are basically Western technologies which has been brought in or they are indigenous?
No, they are not indigenous. Some of the engineering input, the technical expertise has come from Bechtel and a whole lot of other vendors. The fabrication, some of it has happened in India by Larsen and Toubro and other big firms. Some of it has happened overseas. You see, in a refinery, it's not only technology. As I said, manpower in setting up a refinery will have a major contribution. Right? While Bechtel may be there to provide the technology to all the countries in the world for a fee, but Bechtel cannot provide them 200,000 people to work for 3 years on a production site, on a refinery site. Right? For that you have to come to a country like China or India.
How is Singapore having sufficient amount of or significant amount of
Again, because of the British influence. Singapore, whatever.
also labor shortage, like they are.
Labor shortage, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Singapore actually.
When did the Singapore refineries come up? Look at the history of those refineries. They came up during the British period, when the Britishers were ruling in India. So, why didn't Indian workers go as plantation workers in Africa and Latin America? Right? Same thing happened in banana plantations. Indians have gone and worked. People have gone and worked in tobacco plantations from India, haven't they? Why? Because they didn't have local labor force available. So you had people from India going, people from Africa traveling to tobacco and banana plantations and sugar mills and stuff like that. Those kind of things will happen, but they will not happen now. They have happened in earlier regimes, in earlier times. Today it may not be possible for the government of India to start enrolling 1 lakh people to go to China and set up a refinery. I don't think it's going to happen. It may happen with commercial contracts. That somebody comes here and says, everybody who wants to go to China, raise your hand. You may all like to go. But that's again out of free will, but not forced labor. Earlier it used to happen कि पूरे गाँव के गाँव उठा के ले गए. अब वो नहीं हो सकता. Okay, now we're talking about, when we talk about Nelson's complexity, we also said that for Jamnagar it has a special significance. One of the things he said was it can use a variety of crudes, right? So a hugely complex refinery can use the lousiest of crudes and produce the best of finished goods. That is what complexity does for you. So obviously if you are using the cheapest possible sourest crude and producing the most sophisticated Euro 4 and Euro 5 products, so your margins are going to be higher. 2. It gives you the flexibility to produce a wide slate of products. Jamnagar does not produce any furnace oil, any fuel oil. We don't produce it. Why? Because we tend to crack it into lighter products, get better recovery. Obviously, sophisticated markets of the West depend on Jamnagar. Today, if you were to send some materials to California, to Western US markets, they are very, very environmental conscious. The only refinery in Asia which can supply to those is Jamnagar. There is no other refinery in Middle East or in Asia that can supply to Western US markets. This we have already done. Just to give you a picture. The Jamnagar tank farm, we said it's about 4 million tons, right? The marine tank farm, the largest, obviously, in the world. You know what is the area of this particular, this is during construction. What is the area of this particular tank? One single tank, this is the largest tank. Approximately,
Football stadium.
who said this? Just slightly off the mark. Is the equivalent of 3 football grounds. 3. Okay. This is built on, if I recall correctly, I think 4.5 acres. A huge place. The cost of making the holding wall round, around every tank you have a withholding wall raised up to 6 meters or so. The purpose being that in case the tank bursts, the oil should be contained within that. The cost of making this wall was about 14 crores. Just the wall. Okay. Just to give you a scale of operations. This second picture is the world's longest oil jetty. It's again in Jamnagar. It's a 7 kilometer long jetty. And this jetty has the ability to handle 4 VLCCs simultaneously. 4 VLCCs can be loaded or unloaded simultaneously. In the future, we are looking at pipeline from Kales, Barmer to Jamnagar, which will be a heated pipeline, because we have tied up with Kales for a supply. I think you were mentioning about gross margins, right? Look at this. And for the current year, it is even better. Because half-yearly results have just been announced a week ago, 10.15. 6.6 previous year, 8.4 last year, and 10.15 this year so far. Likely to be even better. And more so when you convert it to rupees, this 10.15 will be even sweeter. Because dollar is today at almost 51.5, right? And various banks estimated by March to touch anywhere between 53 to 54. So see what it does for, not only for the balance sheet of Reliance Industries, look at what it does for the country. You know, in Reliance, we are, I would say, trained to say that what is good for Reliance is good for India. And I say this in reverse, that we don't work for Reliance, we work for Indian interest. It's just incidental that Reliance pays our salary. In terms of production, look at this. Last year, again 62 million tons, we produced 66.6 million tons. That's the actual production. And this half year, till September 30th, we are already at 24.1, which means that this year, we are doing a better realization of capacity. And at 10% again, 107. Isn't that along the lines that we were discussing earlier? That because the refining capacity has not increased, demand has increased, so more and more capacity utilization will happen. Now there is a pitfall to this. There is a possibility that we may be overstretching our plants. There is a possibility. They might crumble. So that is something we have to guard against. Right? I'm not saying that it is happening, but there is a probability that it may happen. That you may be overstretching your plants and they may falter. Export story. Again, from 32.8 MMC of finished goods to 38.6 and to 20.5 in this half year. And look at it, dollar terms, 24 to 33 billion, now in half year, almost 21 billion. So what is good for Reliance is equally good for India, because this money is not flowing to Reliance, it's only rupees which flow to Reliance, the dollars flow to India. Now, something to talk about, oil trade, how does it happen? Well, Platts is the basic, yes, but in Reliance, we feel that spot rates give us a better probability of leveraging the pluses in the market. It's possible only because of 2-3 reasons. Large holding capacity. We have large tanks, right? So we can hold. Now, for a refinery which produces 66 million tons, right? 4 MMT is equivalent to how many days? Engineers, please use your mental maths faculties here. 16th part of the year. 365 divided by 16 is how much? Approximately how many days? 20 days? Okay. So if for 20 days I don't move a ship out and I continue to produce at my optimum or rated capacity, it will not impact my storage. Definitely they will be under constraint. Yeah? But 20 days is the holding capacity. No refinery in the world has. Are you with me? Right? This is a great boost. It allows us to get or realize better rates. So we are not under pressure to sell. You know, many times refineries or refiners have to sell in distress because they have no orders in hand, and they have refinery working full, and they don't know where to put the product. And there are no tankers available. As I said, tankers also numbers are limited. Think of it, 2,500 tankers floating around the whole world, 644 refineries. And out of them, only the top 10 refineries are the large guys. Rest probably produce enough only for the local village or local town or local state at best. Or if it's a small country, maybe the local country. Right? The major exporters of oil products are about the top 20 refineries, 25 refineries. And there are only 2,500, 2,600 oil tankers which are capable of going on the high seas. Now imagine what a limited resource we are talking of. So obviously networking is the name of the game. How do you that's why you find, all these funny situations where Chevron has a 10% stake in one refinery, a 20% stake in another refinery, a 10% stake in some shipping company, a 20% stake in some car company and stuff like that. You are trying to network and build relationships so that you can have a symbiotic relationship going forward and that you are not left in the lurch at any given time. Similarly, Reliance is trying to do financial muscle. We leverage our financial muscle, right? We leverage our high gross margins. We have that. We are not in a panic situation or desperate to sell. Hedged crude supply. A large company obviously cannot run a refinery without assured product. So we have a huge hedging contracts going all the way up to 18 months. When you have 18 months hedged refinery crude, obviously your product state you know very well. So you are better able to anticipate and leverage that, plus the economies of scale. When you are buying 60 million tons of crude or 65 million tons of crude, you have that much more bargaining chips with which to go ahead. Rates obviously are at Singapore or Dubai. One, we don't give any unsecured supply. It has to be fully secured by our bankers. Coming to the HSD story. Now this is a story which is actually hurting this economy the most because of the under-recoveries. We are probably the fifth or sixth largest HSD consumer in the world and growing. We consume the equivalent of about 974,000 barrels a day. And look at the graph, how it is going up. Look at this, look at that. It only happened in the last less than 15 years. It's a vertical kind of graph from almost 8,000 to 25,000, 25 million. Right? It's a huge jump. Massive dieselization has happened in the West, and in India it is happening every day, even as we speak. Between 2001 and now, in the last 1 decade, from 12% vehicles sold in India which were on diesel, today the number is over 40%. So, not only in terms of percentages, the absolute numbers. In 2001, India used to produce and sell a little over 400,000 vehicles. Today, we are producing and selling how many vehicles? Energy Institute, no interest in cars, my dear. What is this? How many vehicles do we produce and sell in a year? Cars.
3 million vehicles.
Hmm?
3 million vehicles.
3 million. 30 lakhs. Little off the mark. They're over 1.5. Okay, but still, it's a huge number. So from 400, 500,000, we've trebled our production. And of that, from 12% we have moved to nearly 40%. You see what a massive dieselization is happening. That is what is driving this graph. Kerosene, another political hot potato. Yeah.
Sir, for the HSD consumption, you talked about a large increase in the number of diesel cars that are being produced and sold currently. But in India, is it not because of the subsidy that we have on diesel, because of which the rising price of petrol has?
But dieselization का मतलब और क्या है यार? See, earlier when you thought of a car, let's say in your father's generation or grandfather's generation, a car typically meant a petrol car. That is why it was called motor spirit, right? Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Car meant petrol-driven car. Yeah? It never meant diesel car. Why is diesel becoming more popular? Because it is subsidized. Definitely, that subsidization or artificial control or regulation of price is a determining factor. Yes.
But then when we are talking about deregulating the diesel as well, now, so this.
You think it is going to happen?
No.
Ask me. In my lifetime, it won't happen. If it happens in your lifetime, count your blessing. It is not going to happen. This government or any government in a country, which is a coalition government, will never find the guts. Will never find the guts. Yeah? It's not going to happen. Let's not kid ourselves. What may happen is some calibration of taxes, some calibration of excise, some calibration tinkering. Minor tinkering, 1 rupee, 2 rupee here and there, that's all. And maybe if we are lucky that the oil price comes crashing down. Or the rest of the world stops producing and consuming diesel. If that happens, it's not likely to happen in my lifetime, so let's not talk about it.
Diesel is more polluting than petrol, so why is
No, it's not. I don't think that is a scientifically proven thing. You see, earlier people used to talk about that because the quantum of diesel in absolute terms produced and consumed in the world was far greater, and therefore it was a larger tonnage of soot that you were releasing. Right? So from that point, absolute, yes. But if you were to burn a liter of petrol versus a liter of diesel, no, it doesn't work. Okay, coming to kerosene. Kerosene consumption is going down. Mainly 2-3 reasons. One, because of high aspirational value attached to LPG, people in urban areas or semi-urban areas and rural areas want to switch. They want to show off their, having made it by getting a bottle connection. So in the rural economy, imagine a guy, even if he doesn't have a motorcycle, even if he has to go to the nearest town to buy a refill on a cycle, but he still wants to show off his cylinder. That is his way of expressing his prosperity. Right? It's an aspirational product. Second, electrification has played a role. And 3, because electrification has happened, so the use of kerosene for illumination, petromaxes and those lamps is down. For heating and cooking is down. And on top of that, companies, consumers are becoming more and more aware of the quality and quantity aspect of the fuels. Therefore, the misuse of kerosene for adulterating diesel is also coming down. Because companies now have campaigns like Pure for Sure and Q&Q and Assured and stuff like that. So, company officials are also getting active, government is getting active, therefore adulteration is also dropping. It may not have dropped to absolutely zero levels, but it is definitely on the decline. LPG, as I said, aspirational. So, government is also making it available. More distributors, more consumers, and Therefore, growth in production and supply. Look at it. From 6.7 at 10.8 MMT, 14.3, and this year expected to be upwards of 14.7. It's almost a 40% hike in 4 years. And this is bound to increase. But fortunately for us, because of Jamnagar 1 and 2 being there, our dependence on imports for LPG has come down. Today almost 75% of the LPG we consume is produced in India. Whereas earlier, almost 75% used to be imported. Right?
Sir, why has this still led to the increase in price of LPG? Because now we look at LPG commercial cylinders, previously used to get for 600, now you get for 800. Whereas for domestic use, you previously used to get cylinders whenever you want, but now it's only the first cylinders that are free and the rest we're at commercial price. So if you're saying that the consumption is increasing and we're also able to produce, are you saying it's directly related only to crude price or is it because of the consumption?
You see, I didn't call your name.
Srinivas.
Srinivas, internationally, the price of crude and the price of finished goods, while you might say that it's the finished goods flow out of the crude, but their prices are independent of each other. There may be a situation where you have crude ruling at a particular price, diesel ruling at a different and illogical, unconnected price, and petrol ruling at an altogether different price. There have been situations where, for example, in India, we are used to seeing petrol as more expensive than diesel. But there have been millions of times and opportunities when international or global prices of petrol are in fact 30 to 40% lower than diesel. It's all again about demand and supply, logistics, about refinery shutdowns. We mentioned all those factors. It could be a combination of any of those factors. And these prices do not necessarily follow any logical thread between them. There is no correlation between the prevailing price of crude with MS or with HSD or with LPG. Pure and simple demand supply. And they are independent of each other. Just because they flow out of one tree, it's like saying okay, just because grapes were cheaper this year, wine should also be cheaper. It may appear logical to a sane person, but in international oil business, it doesn't happen that. Because they are independent products going into independent areas. It's not necessary that all the products of one refinery will go into one area. MS story. Again, fast growing economy, more and more aspirational needs of people being met, transportation needs being met, more vehicles, more two-wheelers, more mopeds, more everything. Demand is rising. We are the 11th largest consumer of MS in the world, when vehicle ownership is less than 4%, I guess. And as soon as it reaches a certain threshold, it will become number 2 or 3 in the world. The rate at which we are adding vehicles every year, my feeling is in the next 10 years it will move from there to the top 4. Not very far away, 10 years. ATF, again, increasing by more and more air travel. In my lifetime, I have seen from one stodgy Air India or Indian Airlines, now you have over 20 airlines. From 600 aircraft in the whole country, now you have over 16,000 aircraft. Whether Bentley's or Delhi's doesn't matter. Right? From Delhi and Bombay, today you handle over 28 million passengers per year. Whereas all the airports of the country put together 20 years ago did not handle more than 12 million passengers. Look at the growth and numbers. So ATF is bound to grow. Tourism. As airlines become cheaper and competitive, people have more money, they fly. So ATF demand will grow. Again, any story on energy will remain incomplete without talk of renewable energy. Right? Let this last part not stop you from thinking about this subject, because while it is true that large capital cost and financial viability of renewable energy projects today is in doubt. Their large capital cost, financial viability can be in doubt, and they will act as major deterrent to that only today. You never know how tomorrow will shape. Tomorrow could be a different story. Therefore, you need to continuously think along renewable energy lines. For example, as we discussed earlier, the cost of setting up a huge refinery or upgrading a refinery in the OECD countries is going to kill them. They'll be out of business. And that is the reason why they are looking at having greater reliance on renewables in the coming decades. America has a declared policy of switching over to 30% renewables. Well, it may happen, it may not happen. It's not necessary that every target has to be met. Even if from 12% you reach 27%, not 30%, it doesn't matter. You've still grown by leaps and bounds. Europe has a target to have a 50% reduction in nuclear power in the next 15 years. Right? Now, all those things will have an impact. But please remember, the largest contributor in renewable energy, while it is only 16% of the total energy pie, the largest contribution is coming from traditional biomass. इंडिया में क्या बोलते हैं? उपले, हीटिंग के लिए, कुकिंग के लिए यूज करते हैं उपले, लकड़ी जलाते हैं, यूरोप में पानी गर्म करने के लिए लकड़ी जलाते हैं, ईस्टर्न यूरोप में खास तौर पे, ठीक है? हीटिंग के लिए लोग फायरप्लेस में लकड़ी जलाते हैं। ट्रेडिशनल बायोमास, दैट इज इट। Hydroelectricity, 3.5%. All modern renewable and whatever, जितने भी कॉन्फ्रेंसेस होती हैं वो सारी हाइड्रोजन होती हैं। सोलर के ऊपर कॉन्फ्रेंस साल में 65 होती हैं पूरे इंडिया में, राइट? जियोथर्मल के ऊपर यूरोप में मेरा ख्याल 165 होती होंगी, और बायोफ्यूल्स के ऊपर में तो हर दिन 65 होती होंगी। But the fact still remains, while we may laugh at it, their outputs today may be very, very small, but they are moving in the right direction, and given time, when oil prices go up, the scale of the bio or the renewable pie becomes bigger, the project sizes will become bigger, their cost will come down. So it's something which is going to happen. Oil will continue to rise, renewables will continue to become cheaper, a stage will come when they will be at balance, or renewables will be cheaper. That is the time when everybody will tend to get more and more. But at that time you cannot develop capacities, you have to start developing now. Technologies and capacities. Just to give you an idea, India would need approximately 3,500 square kilometers of corn cultivation to produce enough ethanol for a 10% blend. 3,500 square kilometers would mean the equivalent of 3 Delhis, NCRs. So maybe the equivalent of 2 NCRs. Okay, not a very large area for a country of how many millions square kilometers? Anybody? What is the area of India? Anybody who gives me the answer gets 2. Now,
1.71 million square kilometers.
you give me back your first prize. 1.6 million what? You give me back the first prize. Wrong answer. My dear sir, you know everything about energy. Also know something about your country. At least और कुछ नहीं तो एरिया और पॉपुलेशन तो पता होनी चाहिए. पॉपुलेशन भी नहीं पता होगी, सेंसस की बताओ कितनी है? 1 सेकंड यार, लास्ट उसको क्वेश्चन पूछना, उसको बोलना यार, प्लीज. हाँ, लास्ट सेंसस व्हाट इज इंडियन मेल पॉपुलेशन? तो क्वेश्चन तो मैं पूछूंगा ना. Okay. India's area is about 3 million square kilometers. About. Okay. I'm not getting into the specifics. About 3 million. And 3,500 square kilometers is nothing. If we actually have the will, it is easily doable. And surprisingly, this 1 acre of oil producing equivalent of 10 barrels of ethanol to produce equivalent of 10 barrels of oil is by American standards. I am adopting the same standards to India. While this is just a mathematical calculation to give you a imagination of how much is needed, the area might be slightly long. What you need may be slightly more, maybe 5,000 square kilometers. It's not very large area, please understand. It's just, and you know something, there is a country in this world which allows 100% ethanol in internal combustion engines. Name that country.
Brazil.
सुना ही नहीं एक एक करके बोले Brazil, right? It is possible to have 100% ethanol working in a internal combustion engine. We don't need any oil, right? Now, if a Brazil can do it, any other country can do it. It's just that they have moved in that direction. They may not have moved in many other directions which are desirable. Fine, but in this direction they have worked, they have moved towards that. They have got enough capacity and enough resources deployed in that. Similarly, if we want, we can go into corn. And we only need what, 10-12% increase area every year. And obviously, when your demand is increasing and your area cannot expand all the time. So what will you do? You will parallelly work on quality of seeds, improving the output, drip irrigation, all those things. So you probably have capacity constraints coming in there after 10, 20, 30 years, and you say, all right, now we have reached a point where we are the world's best producer of corn. Right? But what will be required? Stable rates. US biggest problem with corn cultivation is the rates are not stable, and therefore the biofuels industry goes for a loss. The year in which you have a good crop, the rates come down, the farmer has to commit suicide, or nearly. Because in all his effort, he doesn't get what he deserves. And in the year when the crop is poor, he gets a far better price because of shortage. So he is happy if the crop fails. So what you need is a regime of stable prices. Nice picture. From 35% dependence on oil in our energy pie, we will be moving down to 25. Makes you happy? Shouldn't. Look at the absolute demand. 2001, 2 and 2000. Look at it. 122 MMT, 173, 190, moving up to 364 by 2025. That's another 12 years, 13 years. From 190 we will be moving to almost double, right? Which means that we'll have to set up an additional 20 refineries or more. Because today 190 becoming 364 in 10 years, and if the lead time for setting up a refinery is 5 years, look at where we are heading. So every year 2, 3, 4 refinery concepts should be coming in. Adequate investment in the shipping infrastructure. Look at this. 2003-4 to 2013-14. Look at what is going to happen in the shipping sector. Look at the total. From 458 MMT, it is going to move up to 962 MMT. And 2025 it is slated to cross 1.7. Where are you going to get so many new ports? Because are we making the investments? These are questions which obviously the government has to consider, ponder over and make the correct decisions. But unfortunately, capacities are going to become constrained, particularly ports. And that is the reason why you have so many ships waiting in India for so long, 7 days for unloading, 5 days for unloading. And that is why any refinery concept which comes has to have their own jetting, otherwise they will go out of business. Which means every refinery will become that much more expensive as the capital cost will go up. I am not going to elaborate too much on this. This is the Hydrocarbons Vision 2025 document, Chapter 6. The objectives of this document are listed. These are the broad objectives, and in which the highlighted ones are the 3 or 4 areas where I think private sector has a major role to play. Right? Self-sufficiency and all, okay. Major role, a company like Reliance, to have a free and healthy competition, free market and healthy competition. Customer services through better retailing practices and make available unadulterated quality products. I think this is where private sector, particularly the retailing arms, have a role to play. I'm not going to elaborate too much on this. Okay. Just to brief you about major upcoming refineries. There would be many more. This is not an exhaustive list, just to give you an idea. Alzor, 615,000. Jazan at 400,000. And then, of course, you have the Sinopec Fusion Refinery at 250,000. These are the three.